some experiences don't just change your story, they dismantle it and rebuild you from the inside out. Welcome to the Soul Mirror. I'm your host, Shreya. Today, we are stepping into a moment that shook assumptions, revealed hidden trauma, and activated a deeper truth. This conversation about healing, discernment, power, and what happens when truly spiritual ideas collide with lived reality. And today I have Heather Ann Ferri with me in this wonderful conversation. So, welcome, Heather. I'm honored to have you on my show. Yeah. So, Heather, you have spoken about a powerful experience and like with a healer in Mexico. At the time, what were you seeking and what did you believe you were stepping into?
Okay, so yes, roughly about 10 years ago, I was invited to teach at a woman's retreat in Mexico. And the invitation came through an unexpected connection online. A woman had been following my posts on Facebook, and she was a detox specialist. And over time, she began referring me clients from all over the world in regards to healing from childhood abuse and trauma. And eventually she said, "Hey, I'd like you to join as a teacher on this retreat in Mexico." It was kind of like a last minute thing. And I was like, okay, sure, I'll go to Mexico. you know? And so when I arrived to Mexico, we were on this beautiful mountain. Like there was a mountain with different, like sort of villas to live in. And then on top was where the retreat center, the classroom was. And, I kind of felt the first day like a lot of complex energy, and I wasn't quite sure what was going to happen that week. The leaders who were the teachers, there was some karmic energy happening, and the atmosphere around food was unsettled, and I just tried to not judge. I tried to stay detached and just like say, okay, follow my inner compass, honor what I say, stay grounded in, and serve. And after the second day, I looked down like at this one hill angle, and there was like this little hut. And I said, I'm going to separate myself a little bit. I like the energy down there. That's going to be my classroom. So I told everybody when we're doing our work schedule, I'll be in that. That's going to be my classroom. And so basically, what was interesting is she positioned me to sleep at night at the bottom of the mountain, which in yoga is the root chakra. And so I had to climb each morning to the top of the mountain, which is the crown chakra. And it's just interesting, these little details, they matter. And so I remember the second day in the classroom working with breath and chanting, and I felt, because I'd never been to Mexico, but there was something familiar about the land, about the ocean, about the energy, and I felt very comfortable, almost like I had been here before. And I felt the Divine Mother, I felt Jesus, and these were just sort of like very profound, not like how I felt like in my hometown, teaching and stuff. And so the second day I was teaching breath work, and we were working on chanting, and the women were standing, and I placed my hands on the feet because the feet tell the past life stories. The feet tell everything, especially the bottoms of the feet. And the women started to cry. They started to have really profound shaking and stories coming out of them and information. And it was not what anyone expected. I didn't even expect it. It was really, I'd done Reiki energy work in my hometown, but this was like a whole other level. And so after that hour, when the women were going up for their next class, this like everybody was like, what just happened? And it was almost like going to Mexico in this particular land was an activation for me. It was almost like I've done this before. And so as the week went on, there was one particular woman that had very serious stomach issues for many, many years. And it was acting up. And we know that the stomach's rooted to trauma, gut health, the SOADs. But I had her lie down, and I just placed my hands over her belly, and I started to do my inner chanting just to myself. And within about 10 or 15 minutes, the pain was gone, and it was gone the rest of the day, which was a big deal for her. and the next day. And so it was like this activation upgrade with my energy, my hands. And the day before we left, there was, in my classroom, 'cause what happened is eventually everyone wanted to be in that classroom, like, all day. And I was kinda like the teacher, like, "Get out of my classroom, this is my space," Like, when I wasn't teaching, I was like, "Go somewhere else," but it was like I was holding the energy of the highest frequency of healing and light, and the women were painting, there was a project going on, and usually I would detach from them when I wasn't in class just to sort of regenerate my energy because it was, they were healing. They had a lot of trauma, they had a lot of baggage, but I decided to sit there and watch them. And as I was sitting and watching the women painting, I just slowly felt like I was going into a trance. And I slowly lied down and I fell asleep. And as I was falling asleep, a lot of heat and a lot of healing was starting to happen inside of my body. And I started to hear these statements. Well, what happened afterwards, as soon as I woke up about an hour later, one of the lead teachers was sitting right beside me and everybody was gone. And I couldn't get up right away because if you know a healing crisis or you know a healing upgrade, it can be a lot for the body and the system, and you have to be very gentle, like kind of like with a baby. And so I just laid there and she said, "Do you need water? Are you okay?" I said, she said, "You know what? You had a really magical healing here, and I was holding space. I wanted to touch your back, but it was on fire. It felt like it was on fire, and I felt Jesus was working on you. And I just wanted to hold, presence and grace during the period. And I thanked her so much. And I actually didn't share this with her. She helped me get up. I was really out of it, and she helped me walk up. And then one of the leaders had actually prepared a bowl of sweet potatoes and vegetables to ground me, which I was so grateful for. Nobody ever asked me what happened. But what happened that night, as I wrote in my journal, is the message was healers of your caliber need to be the highest honored in society. We must restore respect for the ancient healers. And I have to be honest with you, I went home the next day. I didn't think much of it. I went on with my life as a full-time trauma coach. And 10 years later, right now, as I talk about in a lot of my interviews and my YouTube channel about the new earth, the new society that I want us to come into, I think that statement is really important right now to share. Healers of your caliber need to be the highest honored in society. And I'm not talking about the the healers that have we have seen in America in the last 20 years a lot of specific figures that were masters and had these huge followings. And a lot of them, unfortunately, were men who were doing trafficking and hurting children. I'm not talking about that type I'm talking about the real ancient healers, the ones who have come and probably are in the forest and in this area, you don't even know who they are because they're not online, that are going to be needed to move us forward into a new earth. There's one more mystery to the story, especially for those analytical people, because it breaks that bubble. When I was going from the retreat back to the airport, the taxi driver and I had a conversation about healing generational trauma. He was on his second marriage and he was really open about healing his own, which was exciting. And I remember giving him as a gift my first book, Victim to Victory. But when I got home, I had worn this pearl necklace. It's 108 pearls. And I had bought it at an ashram when I was studying Kundalini yoga. This was gone. So I had one little luggage and a purse, and this was gone. I had been wearing it every classroom, but after the healing I received in the next day, it was gone. I So what happened was I didn't have this necklace. I eventually got rid of that luggage and that purse. And I eventually moved into the townhome I'm sitting in right now. And I'm going through ancestral healings with my father on the other side. And as I was going through one of the healings, this appeared. And what my father was really trying to teach me was that magic is real, that miracles are real, and that when we follow our heart in healing, as painful as it can be, sometimes for me, it was many, many years of healing. So it wasn't like I healed in a weekend or I healed in a month. But when we follow our hearts in healing, we can never go wrong. So that's really the message and the story I wanted to share today about my experience with Mexico. I've never shared it on a podcast. I've never shared it really with anybody else. You're the first. And when I, heard about your podcast, I thought it was the appropriate audience to sort of share this story. So I really appreciate you having me on and allowing me to do so.
I'm really honored that you choose me to come here and share this wonderful story with me and my audience. This is really, really amazing. And also, this experience seems to have surfaced trauma rather than bypassed it. How did it challenge common narratives around instant healing?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have the answer for that. I I think that we all have our own life records. We do have our own life records. And we come into this earth, Mother Earth, with those records. And some of us have positive karma and some of us have negative karma. And some of us accumulate positive karma in this lifetime. And some of us accumulate negative karma in this lifetime. So knowing thyself is really important because let's say somebody's praying for that miracle to happen in their health, but maybe that's not the path they're supposed to go to get to their health. Maybe their health is about, I need to change the people around me, or I need to change my lifestyle. And as I empower myself to do so, the miracle that I heal myself happens. You see? So it's not a one thing. That woman that I had that healing with me in Mexico with my hands on her belly, maybe that was for me to see my healing abilities. Maybe that was a teaching is saying you have some serious healing abilities. So, it's not one size fits all. And I tend to think in social media, we tend to hear the same things over and over again in healing and spirituality, that it becomes the only programs that people have registered. So I think what you're asking is an important question. So, you know, does it make somebody better when they get a miracle healing? No, it just means that that's in their life contract. Maybe they earned it in their past life. So I think it's really important to understand and your soul database, your past life records, your akashic records, so that you can heal. Like, let's say you have a lot of negative karma, you were a predator in a past life or maybe this life. You're going to need to do a lot of work, a lot of paying debt to build up to that magic and to those miracles that could come from within you. They don't have to come from somebody else. Does that
That
make
is
sense?
so big. Yes, yes, definitely. And I think this is a really important tension too, like healing that feels expansive versus healing that's actually safe and integrated. And
Yeah.
also you worked deeply with ancestral and bloodline trauma. How did this event activate those layers for you personally?
So I had been working for years with people on trauma in this life. But within that practice, I started to see them unravel through the brain protocols of CPTSD and childhood brain protocols, which in India, I mean, I think this was rooted back in India with Jesus personally, the brain protocols I work with. And because they're Sanskrit, their breath patterns, their finger placements, and they initially bring up people's past lives, which I really love because it comes from inside of them instead of somebody telling them what it is. Because if somebody's going to tell you your past life and all, it may not actually register or make sense. But when you can retrieve that from within, then you understand what to do with it. So when my father passed away in February 2022, and I started to hear him directly every day, and we had a lot of issues to clean up, he started to guide me to doing different types of physical work on my body to release ancestral trauma while I was doing the brain protocols, while I was drinking, electrolytes reduced water and everything else. And that's when I started to really unravel ancestral bloodline information that made sense, actually. It made sense in understanding these powerful, specifically on my mom's side, these powerful Black women who were brutally, enslaved, chained, some stolen, and an understanding who I was and how resilient I was with working so hard on healing my traumas and being so focused on it and being passionate about empowering specifically victims and people who have really experienced childhood traumas or remember, and so, yeah, that's how that sort of unraveled. It's just in the last couple years, and because of all of my experience of breath work, and it's like when you become a professional dancer, you learn the ballet bar, and then the next year you go to the next level, and then you go to the next level. Well, it's been 20 some years, so now I'm at the highest level, which I can unravel all, pretty much all my past lives. I know a lot of my fathers, I know some of my moms, and really understand, oh, my blueprint. My blueprint's different than my mom's and dad's, by the way. I mean, they're very important pieces to the puzzle because I chose them. And when I was in my 20s, I was like, I remember hearing that statement, you choose your parents. I was like, I don't know if I chose my mom because she was so abusive to me. But now I perfectly, yeah, if I'm going to be a master at specific things, trauma and manipulation and leadership, then yeah, I definitely picked the right parents. So it's like, okay, so that's just the layers, you know what I mean? It's like,
Like, I think very striking, and like how personal healing often becomes a mirror for collective wounds. And also, you write about moving from victim to goddess. In moments like this, how do we honor harm without getting stuck in the victim identity?
hmm. Well, I think if you know that so a lot of the clients I worked with, including myself, never labeled us as victims. Like we were feeling shame and guilty and felt bad for even acknowledging that something went wrong. So I do think you do need to recognize and really specifically write down the psychology of how you define how you were a victim. Okay. So don't follow mainstream. You're really going into, and that's kind of like why my book, which is right here, like I have a lot of questions for you to write down. There's over 133 questions. And that's because you need to figure out how you define victim in order to know how to rewire it. And it comes through behavioral patterns, signaling, energy, and then obviously sexual abuse and physical abuse. I had amnesia in my 20s. So and when you're doing brain work, usually when people are in their 30s, 40s years old, they have all these health issues, cancers, chronic pain, deep depression. And those were the clients that came to me. Nobody came to me for childhood abuse, but they had childhood abuse. Yeah. So you have to define it. And then so the average person probably won't, to be honest with you. But if they read Transcending Victim to Goddess and they start writing out and start exploring, why would they want to do that? They would want to do that if they keep having toxic marriages or relationships, if they keep having health issues that they can't understand, and it doesn't matter how many doctors they go to. Um, if they feel like they're missing their life purpose, they don't know why they're here. Those are the reasons to read Victim to Goddess. Nobody thinks honestly, nobody thought they were a victim. And then you don't know how to get to goddess then because you're kind of wrapped in this generational psychology, this loop. And so that's what this book's about, is discovering yourself. I mean, I talk in the first chapter about my childhood trauma, but then I'm talking about self-identity. I'm talking about the mysteries of life, of how these different people come into my life that I don't plan, and they're planting seeds to my soul. And that's really important for people because they may be stuck in a job and not know how to get out of it. But if they start diving into their path, they'll be like, oh, you know what? I met that guy 5 years ago and he told me, and maybe if I reconnect with him, or it just starts to expand your possibilities. So, for people who know they come from childhood abuse or sexual abuse, you need to be kind to yourself, but you need to take actions. So I didn't sit in sorrow. I mean, I cried a lot, but I didn't sit. I took action in learning the techniques I needed to shake out trauma from my body. I sat for hours doing the brain protocols I teach people. I have a very healthy diet that feels like I love myself. I was a sugar addict too, and I have a book coming out soon, like in the next couple days on that. So, the sugar was numbing, the sugar was allowing me to sit still, the sugar was allowing me to be a workaholic, right? So I'm avoiding the fact that I have something to heal. And so I think when you sit down and you understand and you explain to yourself, and if you don't know if you're a victim, that's okay. It's just about how do I get to a place in my life where I feel more fulfilled, I have better fulfilling relationships, I'm happier with myself. And that's the goddess. The goddess for me is about the sacred woman that was never really taught in my environment. It wasn't taught in the television set. It wasn't taught in the music that I listened to. So I didn't have a reference role for a sacred woman. I had to go inside these ancestral information and go inside these chants. And I had to start to paint my own picture of how do I want to be treated and valued and respected, even if the outside doesn't see it that way. I have to continue to show up as the goddess, as the sacred woman.
Yes, I think that distinction is really profound. And also for listeners navigating spiritual teachers, healers, or retreats, what signs help discern true integrity from spiritual performance?
Hmm. If you can sit silent, uh, at least 15 minutes a day, and then eventually one day a week for a couple hours with yourself, and you're integrating it. You got to be with self. Some of the spiritual communities in yoga, vegan, that I've seen, there becomes a codependency, kind of like, i- in essence, I write about in book 2, AA. I think AA is a really great beginner step for people with alcoholism. But what I was asked to is to go into the meetings and talk to older people who had lost a lot of their loved ones through alcoholism, and re redefine what would you do differently with this program, which I showed them, but they weren't willing to invest in it and they weren't disciplined enough. We want to make sure that at some point we're not holding somebody's hand too long. We don't want to have codependency in any realm, whether it's religion, spirituality, addiction, recovery. We want to make sure the toolkit empowers them to eventually walk on their own. That's what healthy parents do with their children. And so I see that, um, unfortunately, I've seen in my career that victims and people that are traumatized can be easily taken advantage of, in these groups where they don't go, and they're somewhat actually being abused in some ways. Because we have in America specifically, in the last couple 100 years, lived in a very narcissistic society where the narcissists were the leaders, the predators were the leaders, and they still are, and to some extent. And until we can dismantle all of that, I do think there's some vulnerability. So when my clients come to me and I know that they are a victim, they get off social media. They cannot go on any social media sites. They actually dismantle all their social media while they're working with me. Um, And there's a lot to that. They become see, predators can smell them out. They can smell them out, and predators have been in, like I said, they've been in religion, they've been in spiritual groups, they've been in yogic groups, they've been in they're everywhere, and so it's not like, "Oh, I dislike one." I love all these groups, but they've been in every group, and they tend to be the leaders, and I think that's also because if you think about it, my ancestors, there was no healing. You just get over it, you survive. You survive. You're lucky if you have a few dollars, so there was no healing. So I had to heal ancestral stuff that was really, really deep. People saw them as property. So we're now living in a time where we actually do have to heal this stuff. And when we heal it, we will recognize the narcissist leaders. They won't be on the platforms anymore. So we have to empower victims to become healed and not codependent on me, not codependent on anybody that they're following. So I will say, having been raised by someone who I consider to be very martyr, dictator, was a good thing in some ways as a teacher, because I really want my clients to think for themselves. And I'm constantly saying, you don't have to agree with my opinion. What is your opinion? How do you feel about this? And I think that that needs to be, because I never want somebody, because I understand actually karma. I understand actually, like everything is written. So if I'm trying to control somebody to always follow me or always be my client forever, then that is also a form of codependency. Does that make sense? So that's kind of where I see we're in a very important time period because people need to heal. We're allowed to heal now, and we're going to heal. And as we heal, we're going to have more healthy, empowered society, like communities again, where we interact with each other, but not one person is the leader. Now, healers are a different shaman healers, true shaman healers are actually very different. They usually live about a mile away from their tribe, and there is a reason for that. They come into the tribe, they do their services, and then they leave to detach, to regenerate themselves. So there's a whole practice in that type of profession, you would call, I guess, or lifestyle. Um, I went kind of on a deep tangent there.
Yeah, yeah, this was really wonderful. I 100% agree with you what you said, and I think your advices are really, really helpful. And this is a amazing conversation with you, like a very heartfelt, true conversation. So, if after this my listeners want to connect with you, then what's the best way?
The best way is Heather Ann Ferri, my name.com is my website, and there's a contact form. My email is on there, youmatter108@gmail.com. The biggest thing is to get on the mailing list. I don't do a newsletter, and if I do one in the future, it will be per quarter. So it'll only be 4 newsletters per year, because I think people are being over bombarded with email, and I don't wanna create that as well. But to get on my emailing list is to just say I'm interested in Zoom classes. I'm starting to partner up with influencers online to create 2-hour workshops, to do PTSD programs online. I'm doing retreats next year, to get on my book list for the second book of Transcending Victim to Goddess, which will be part 2, which is about the workplace. So we're dealing first with your childhood trauma, your self-identity, and then how does that go into the workplace? Things like that to get on the work list. If you're really interested in private coaching, you have to be ready because I'm kind of at the high end at this point. You can email me, let me know, and I'll ask you some questions. We'll probably have a little bit of an exchange of a 20 minute, are we compatible, type thing. And I have stuff about my water ebooks. I'm a big water educator as well. So there's a lot of stuff there. I work with 8 sciences, so it didn't take one science to get to this point in my healing process and being a healer. So that's heatherannferri.com is the best way. And I really appreciate you giving me this platform to share a little bit of myself today.
Thank you so much. And I will definitely make sure to attach all these details or links below so that the listeners can find them easily and get in touch with you. And to all my listeners, if this conversation started discomfort, curiosity, or recognition, stay with it. Healing is not about surrendering your power, it's about embodying it fully. Question what doesn't sit right. Honor your body's wisdom and remember, true transformation doesn't elevate you above your humanity. It brings you home to it. And do not forget to hit the follow button, subscribe, and also feel free to share your thoughts because your ears deserve premium content. Thank you.